Hello, students. I'm going to jump right in. I want to talk about what is this news that you're going to be covering and writing about in a laboratory situation. And I want to talk about the importance of trustworthiness in the news report. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Valleydale and Blue Ridge County, which are the fictional places that you will be covering. What is news? What do you think it is? It's a report on what's going on out there that matters to the reader, to the audience. It can be very close to home. It can be a larger event. It can be something that is national or international in significance, but it has certain qualities that are like what makes you tell a friend when you rush into the room, let me just tell you what I just saw, what just happened. But it needs to be relevant and interesting and timely for something more than the one person that you know. It has to be interesting for the common life, the common good of the public, represented by the audience, the people you're talking to that you don't know. It's a whole bunch of strangers, and you've got to say something interesting to them. Well, how do you know what's interesting to these dozens or hundreds or thousands or 100,000 people that you don't know? Well, you've got to have a pretty broad and different concept of audience than the people that you know. So you're really stepping into a new identity. It's not just you, although you do represent a lot of people, but you have to have a much more diverse and open sense of what's important to all sorts of people. That's a whole subject of diversity that we'll get into. But this is not about you, it's about this common good and this common life of your reader. You're serving, or your audience, if you're in broadcast, you are serving them by telling them what's going on out there. So these reports are timely, they're fresh news. So whether this variety of people out there are highly educated, highly informed, or not, they have something in common, which is they don't know what just happened. That's something that you can tell them. And you know this because you've witnessed it or you've talked to a lot of people or a few people, but you have dependable, verifiable, factual information about something that's interesting, relevant, recent, um, and and checked. It's factual. Now, so it's really a news report that's journalistic. You are now a mass communicator. You are a journalist in this course. We are going to talk about communication that's public relations, and in which case you're not just serving the common good, the public, but you're serving a particular interest, which may be a very valuable interest, maybe a public a nonprofit, but the basic communication is the same, which is that it's factual and interesting and relevant. The book that we're following will get into a paradigm which will sort of tell you how you can make news judgment, and it'll help you shape the story and decide how you begin. And but that's in a sort of abstract terms. That is what news is. It's the factual report that serves the reader. That's interesting, factual, dependable, and trustworthy. So I want to talk a little bit about this matter of trust, which is so important and has always been the bond between the news reporter and her audience. But it's something that's in peril today. It's one of the big problems you've heard a lot about, I'm sure, the problem with journalism. And it's really a sort of disruption in all institutions and trust of all institutions in different ways. But that trust has to be earned by the careful um, holding to the standards, to professional standards, and those standards are ethical. And so you have to think of yourself as an ethical actor. You're an agent of this profession of journalism. And every day you have to earn that trust by doing your job carefully. And when you find that there are conflicts, not between good and bad, you always choose to do the right thing when it's an obvious choice between being honest or not. But really, ethics is more about negotiating and navigating tensions between one good and another. One good is a person's right to privacy, a right to having their voice honored. At the same time, you have an obligation to the public good of letting people know what's going on, especially in public life in a democracy. And so while you are going to respect the dignity and the privacy of a politician, you also know that they're going to spin stories. And they know that your job is not necessarily to make them look good, but to be clear and accurate and fair, and letting the public know what's really going on. So it's a quick example, but ethics, and there's sections about ethics in every chapter of this book. But that is an important practice that you have to internalize. You have to really get used to practicing professional and ethical standards in reporting the news. Now, what you're going to be reporting on, the news that you're going to be finding and using and transforming into stories, into true stories for your reader, also a mythical creation, is a place called Valleydale, a city called Valleydale, in a county called Blue Ridge County, with all kind of people who are described in the city directory at the back of your online lab manual. So what is this Valleydale and Blue Ridge County in the state of Virginia? It's a series of scenarios that my former colleague, the retired department head named Brian Richardson, created, and it was actually evolved in this department over many years before I even arrived in 2003. It's suspiciously like Lexington and Rockbridge County. Over the time of this course, you will have a calendar of this place unfolding, you can look back on what you've already covered in a file called A Year in the Life. And there are people in this town, some of them students at a university, which is suspiciously like W&L, but it's called Virginia Presbyterian University. And there's a military school, and there are elected officials in City Hall, and there are county officials, and there's a school system, there are 3 school systems. So a lot of that is parallel to the community that you live in that you may not hear, you may not know much about, but it's to prepare you for if some of you go on to cover Rockbridge County and Lexington for the Rockbridge Report, you will have practiced this with a safety net and the safety of this lab. and all the damage you can do will be reflected in your grade, not in angry readers or angry sources. Nobody is going to sue you for libel. So that's the beginning lecture, and this is just testing to see how I'm doing. And there will be other videos like this coming up, and this will be followed by a discussion. So